Okay, hello guys, welcome to first history lesson of year 8. Okay, what you're gonna do guys is go to your name. It's not in there as I'm recording it, but it will be. Go to your name and go to the new folder Vikings. Okay, and you should see number 1 overview. Okay, the first couple of lessons we're not actually talking about the Vikings, we're just doing a little bit of historical context, okay, so that you understand whereabouts the Vikings lie in European history. So today we're just doing an overview lesson, okay, so we're going to look very broadly at the collapse of the Roman Empire, and I'll talk a bit about why that's important, okay, when it comes to the Vikings, and then you're going to be placing the Viking Age on a timeline of medieval Europe. So like I said, this lesson is all about just giving you a broad overview. Okay, so we're going to read some information. Before we do that, there's some words. Okay, so preparing for reading words and terms we need to understand. Now, you would have covered some, if not all of this, in year 7, but obviously that was a while ago, and it's worth going over again. So, I've got a timeline here, okay, and there's some terms on it that we need to understand, okay, mainly these terms, BC or BCE, and AD or CE. BCE and CE are the terms we try and use nowadays, but you might see it as BC or AD. Okay, they mean the same thing. Put very simply, okay, BCE, it stands for before Common Era, before the Common Era. Sometimes BC, which actually means before Christ. So whenever you see BC or BCE written either before or after a date, okay, that's identifying years before the Common Era, so before the year 0. Okay, yeah, before the birth of Christ. And then CE is the Common Era over here. Okay, so it's sometimes written as AD. That's Latin. Anno Domini means the after Christ. Okay, so we, for example, are currently in the year 2021 CE or 2021 AD. Okay, lucky for us, the Viking Age is just in this era, but for today's lesson, we're going to just put some things in context, so we will be going back in time a little bit. Okay, the way I always remember it is if it's got a B in it, it means before. So before the year 0, basically. Okay, um, this term we will come up quite a bit in the Vikings and indeed in the Aztecs later on in the term circa, or it's sometimes or often shown as C dot. Okay, so when you see C dot before a date, it means circa, which is Latin for approximately or about. Basically means we don't know the date exactly. Okay, so the further back in time that we go in history, the more likely it is that we don't know the exact date because there may not be written records for things. And also, of course, events can happen over a number of years and they aren't always precise. So, for example, the dates for the Viking Age are circa 790 to 1066, but there's no start and end date precisely. Okay, so C dot just means roughly. Okay, so sometimes we're going to see the year that people were born, but because it was so long ago, they don't know exactly when it was. Okay, okay. So empire. Okay, I'm sure you would have heard that term. So that's an extensive area of land ruled by one group. So, for example, Australia used to be part of the British Empire because Britain used to rule Australia. Barbarian. Okay, so barbarian was a term that was used by the Romans to describe people that they believed were less civilized than themselves. They lived outside of the Roman Empire. So if I just quickly go down to this map of the Roman Empire, if you were a Roman living here in Rome, you would believe the people that lived over here, you would call them barbarians. Nowadays, we use it to mean ruthless, okay, maybe violent, and that is why the Romans called people that, but they basically just didn't like them because they weren't part of the Roman Empire. And then the term medieval is going to come up quite a lot this year. Okay, basically that is a time period in European history, okay, used to describe the approximately 1,000 years between the collapse of the Roman Empire in the West at least, and the Renaissance, which was we'll talk about more next term. Basically, medieval, if we want to keep it simple, is from about circa 500 to 1500 CE. Okay, so the Viking Age took part within the medieval era. Just as a note here, the term medieval should only really be used to describe European history. It doesn't really make much sense when we're talking about the history of other cultures. Okay, so task one, a reminder, we're just doing an overview today to give you some context about what the world was like, or the European world at least, when the Vikings emerged. So we're going to look at the collapse of the Roman Empire. If I just scroll down here, basically we're just going to read this information and you're going to be answering these two questions really from this information. So number one, how long did the Roman Empire last? That's where you're going to just get out a calculator and have to understand BC and AD. Number two, why did the collapse of the Roman Empire mean that civilizations like the Vikings could gain power and influence in Europe? So I'll talk about that after I read, well, as I read through it. Okay, so the Roman Empire began in 27 BCE, so 27 years before the birth of Christ, when Augustus Caesar became the first emperor of Rome. The Romans controlled one of the largest and most powerful empires the world has ever seen. So here is Rome in modern day Italy. So it's spread all the way over Western Europe. So modern day France, Spain, Portugal, and England. Notice, not Scotland. And Eastern Europe as well. So this is modern day Greece, Albania, Romania, all the way down to Turkey, and this is all the Middle East here. So Mesopotamia, for example, is modern day Iraq. This is modern day Israel. Okay, and then all around the coast of North Africa. Okay, so really around this Mediterranean. This is the Mediterranean Sea, and England up here. Okay, and its legacy is still felt today in Western culture in areas such as government, law, language, architecture, engineering, and Christianity. So it's a very long story, but basically Christianity emerged in what is modern day Israel. You can see on this map it's labeled Judea. And actually, at first, the Christians were persecuted by the Roman Empire, but eventually Rome became Christian, and then all of these areas that were within the Roman Empire became Christian. Okay, so historians argue about exactly how and why Rome fell, but many agree that the empire ended in 476 CE when the Roman emperor, Romulus, was forced to give up his throne to the barbarian chief Odysseus. So the barbarian chief Odysseus, over a couple of hundred years, the Roman Empire was being attacked. As you're going to see in the video, one of the reasons historians think it collapsed is that it just got too big. Okay, it was too big for Rome to control this area. Okay, so Rome is finally attacked by Odysseus and overthrown. Okay, just as a side note, it didn't completely disappear. Okay, the Eastern Roman Empire went on for hundreds more years, but this Roman Empire that we see here ceases to exist in 476. Okay, due to the collapse of the Roman Empire in Western Europe, civilizations such as the Vikings were able to expand their influence throughout Europe. As Rome no longer controlled such a large area, the Vikings were able to trade with, raid, and conquer areas that were originally Roman. And again, as you'll see in the video, basically what happens is when the Roman Empire collapses, these areas of Europe kind of fall into much smaller kingdoms. There's lots of infighting, and the Vikings, who come from up here, they're not even on this map, are able to take advantage of that. Okay, so here is an image of the barbarian kingdoms about 500 CE. So this is about 25 years after the collapse of the Roman Empire. You can see that this map, all of this is Roman Empire. And then here you've got broken down into lots of different kingdoms. Okay, so, and here we can actually see the Norse and the Swedes, who were the Vikings. Okay, so how long did the Roman Empire last? So you're going to have to use your BCE and your AD knowledge. Go back up and find the dates here. Okay, and why did the collapse of the Roman Empire mean civilizations like the Romans could gain power and influence in Europe? Good tip here, go back up to the reading and see, well, where was Vikings mentioned and what does it say? Okay, then what you're going to do is watch the video below. Okay, and what reasons does it give for the collapse of the Roman Empire? For this task, feel free to just jot down any ideas. You don't need to write in full sentences. Okay, so I won't play that video. You can do that in your own time. Okay, task 2 then today is to do a medieval Europe timeline. As mentioned already, okay, the medieval period in Europe was 1,000 years, okay, after the collapse of the Roman Empire to the Renaissance. So that's why I put circa 500 to 1500 CE. As we've just seen, the Roman Empire actually collapsed in 476, okay. This period is also known as the Middle Ages sometimes, so in the middle of the Roman Empire and modern history. And it's also sometimes known as the Dark Ages, particularly the first half of it, 500 to 1000 CE. Okay, the reason why it's called the Dark Ages is that after the fall of the Roman Empire, a lot of the Roman culture and the Roman knowledge was lost. This included the art, the technology, engineering, and the history of it. Okay, so historians know a lot about Europe during the Roman Empire because the Romans kept really good records of everything that happened. However, after the Romans, it goes dark. Okay, people stop writing for many, many reasons, and we just don't know as much about this period. Okay, and there's no central government recording events. Okay, this is why historians call this time the Dark Ages. It's also because they kind of see it as a little bit of a bleak period for European history, lots of war, lots of violence. Okay, so the Vikings play a key, significant role during the Dark Ages in shaping, especially Western Europe, but actually a lot of Europe. So this is just a bit of chronology practice. And again, it's to put the Viking Age kind of in a wider context. Okay, remember, chronology is just putting events into the date in which they happened. Okay, these dates you'll notice they don't have BC or AD or anything like that written after it. In history, you can always assume if it hasn't got that written, it is CE, so it's after the year 0. Okay, so we can always assume that. So obviously if we were in lesson, what I was going to do was ask you to, I would have had this printed out for you so you could actually draw on this timeline. If you're able to do that online or if you want to do it on a piece of paper, that would be great. If not, what you can do, guys, is just cut and paste these and reorder them so that they are in the correct chronological order. So the oldest date first. Give you a little bit of a hint. Year 1 is going to be the oldest date. Okay, so however you want to do that, whatever's easiest for you, go ahead. Once you've done that, just want you to use that information to answer these questions. So how long did the Viking Age last? You will be able to do that once you've put these dates in order and read what happened. Identify 3 countries that were impacted by the Viking Age. Again, you should be able to see that on the timeline. And then last thing to do today is, what do you already know or think about the Vikings? Okay, write your ideas below. So I'd like to be able to see what ideas you already have. It's not about being wrong or right. It seems like most of you have heard of the Vikings, so tell me anything you know. It's not about Googling and telling me things. I want to know what your image of them is in your head. Okay, if you already know loads about the Vikings, maybe limit yourself to 5 bullet points. If you're sitting there and you think I know nothing about the Vikings whatsoever, I'm going to challenge you to actually write something because I bet you've got an idea, even if that idea about where they were from, what they were like, even if that's wrong, it's good for me to know what you think. Okay, so guys, I will be on Zoom, okay, for about 10 minutes at the start of the lesson, but hopefully that's nice, easy start. Like I said, this is just to give you a wider context of the world that the Vikings kind of appear into. Okay, all right, so good luck with that, and I will see you in lesson on Thursday. Thank you.